welcome back to the Axiom Medical webinar follow-up. That's really kind of a mouthful when you put it all together like that. Quick background, my name is Holly Foxworth. I'm a registered nurse and I'm also the marketing manager for content here at Axiom. As always, I have a great crew that's with us today that's joined our panel. They are some of the brightest minds when it comes to medicine, mental health, workplace safety, etc. So you'll definitely get an opportunity to meet them. But that is our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Scott Cherry. We have Dara Wheeler, who's our Chief Marketing Officer. We have two CMOs, and then we also have Sean Riley here, who's the founder and president of Save Call Now. So I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. But before we get to that, I did want to just ask you to go ahead and mark on your calendars right now. This next Thursday, we have an event that's going to be the ABCs of CBD. So if you ever have any questions specific to CBD, this is going to be the place where you can get all the answers there. We hear it every year of, is it safe? Is it something that could be used as an appropriate alternative to traditional medications and therapies? How does this fit into a zero tolerance workplace? Will it show up on a drug screen, et cetera? So if you've ever had any of those questions, you're not the only one. America's always been fascinated with CBD. And so we're going to give you some of those answers so you'll know how to appropriately address those things as they come up. So at this point, let's go ahead and have our panel introduce themselves and then we'll jump into questions. Dr. Cherry, you want to go first? Then we'll go to Dara and then we'll end with Sean.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Cherry. I'm Axiom's Chief Medical Officer. I'm a board-certified preventive medicine and public health doctor. I've been supporting the military, corporate, and industrial operations for the past 15 years. And it's good to be following up with you today about the secret signs of substance abuse.
Awesome. Dara?
Thank you, Holly. I'm very appreciative of being here. My name is Dara Wheeler. I'm Axiom's Chief Marketing Officer, the other CMO, and I'm happy to continue this conversation that we started last week.
I love it. And Sean?
Hi, I'm Sean Riley. I'm the president and founder of Safe Call Now, which is a national crisis line for first responders and their family members that I started 12 years ago after walking my journey of being a police officer for almost 20 years through addiction at the same time.
Oh, wow, Sean. I love that. Such great information. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions that we'd gotten this last week that we weren't able to cover. The first one actually it came from Blaine that was asking, what are some of the most common misunderstandings that we have when it comes that we would have as a safety director regarding substance abuse at work? So I'm sure we could take this in a number of different ways. So whoever wants to start, feel free.
Sean, would you like to take that, or myself, or Dara?
Well, Scott, why don't you go ahead, because I'll probably build off of it. I want to see what they were talking about as far as the safety officer. Were they, looking at liability? What were the things they were concerned with?
Sure, and I think the first approach at this is, employees in safety-sensitive roles may have reticence about reaching out for help through employee assistance programs, things like that. You really want to foster a culture of having employees feeling comfortable coming forward if they're being challenged with substance abuse issues, because usually things will tend to worsen, not get better on their own. You want to have a culture that promotes employees coming forward and engaging the help they need, and so with a lot of safety sensitive roles, again, people are very reticent to reach out for help, but I think there's really good data on asking for help is actually a sign of strength and resilience versus a sign of weakness. So I think that's probably how I'd like to start off the conversation on this topic.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. And I think one of the ways that we can help people come forward and ask for help is good policies that go ahead and drive towards good communication and support within the organization. So there's cities that we contract with, and these cities that we contract with, there's policies in place that say, look, if you need help and you come forward and ask for help, you will get 30 days off with pay. Your out-of-pockets and deductibles will be waived, and your job will not be in jeopardy if you haven't done anything wrong or you self-reported. Boy, those are really good supportive policies, and you watch people come forward to get help. I think the other thing is really destigmatizing that I run into, because I see administrators all the time think, oh, this person needs to go to treatment. I mean, what is treatment? I don't really believe that's a sound term now anymore, just because I think administrators, with maybe just because of lack of knowledge, treatment means they're going to go away and come back and be all better. And that's not true. That's just the start of the journey. You know, what we want to do is we want to stabilize our folks, have good policies in place, and start building towards a great life.
Very good points. You know, Derek, you mentioned, I think, something this last week where you were talking about maintaining that communication and really looking more at necessarily performance versus when things are occurring to have those conversations at a later point. Do you want to maybe kind of expand upon that and how that could relate to some of these scenarios there?
Yeah, that's a great point, Holly. I do think it's harder and harder to be a good supervisor or safety professional in this day and age. And it's really important to pay attention to trends and how employees' behavior is changing over time. So instead of trying to decide whether you think somebody's using or abusing drugs or alcohol, it's much more about what visible behaviors you can observe. So is it somebody who is always on time, now all of a sudden always late? What are the changes in somebody's trends or behaviors? And that will help dictate what a response should be.
Great information. Yeah. All right, let's see. The next question I think we had came from Mark, who was asking any recommendations or practices for safely confronting an employee who has made threats or could be violent.
Sean, do you have any guidance there? You might be the best one.
So let's go ahead and reframe this, because sometimes when people appear threatening, or maybe they're more scared than anything else, and that's, anger's the way people know how to reach out. So maybe when we approach someone who may be threatening, we think we're threatening, look, if they cross the threshold, then you probably need to get law enforcement and help involved. However, I always like to approach people as giving them a gift. Is in other words, I'm not coming to attack their behavior. I mean, the person themselves. I'm coming to ask them about their behavior. What is going on? And you're really going to have to play it by ear. See, my police training, that's going to allow me a lot of latitude, because, I deal with people, and I've dealt with people like that before, where someone has maybe not had the training or experience. All I can say, if you can come from a carefrontational manner, not a confrontational, it might help you go a long ways. And I tell people all the time, especially if I approach them, hey, look, I want to give this gift to you. And this gift is, let's talk about your behavior and how maybe I can help you, because this is what I've seen. And I can get a long way with that sometimes.
Really good information. Anything that Dara, Scott, and Dr. Cherry, either one of you want to expand upon that? Anything to add?
I don't think I can. I think Sean's experience really is helpful here. For me in the clinic, things are usually kind of already quieted down. And so I don't have much to add. How about you, Dara?
No, I think that the points that Sean made are correct, in that, number one is make sure that if it is an emergency situation, you get the right people involved. But it is always about kind of de-escalating and making sure that people are safe and are, like Sean said, if you approach it with a seeking to understanding mentality, then you tend to be able to de-escalate things pretty well.
Great information. All right, let's see. The next one was from Rosie that asked, how often should our drug and alcohol policy be updated, and can we perform random drug tests if it's not in the policy?
I could start here, Holly, and then open it up.
Yeah.
I definitely recommend an annual review of your policy. This is something that, especially as laws are changing across the U.S. In relation to legalization of marijuana and others, you should very much take an approach that this is a policy review, at least on a yearly basis. In terms of the question about random drug testing without a policy in place, that is not recommended. drug and alcohol testing is something that you want to have a very clear policy around, and making sure that employees understand that policy. So it's not just create policy, let it sit in a vault somewhere and use it when you need to as a stick. You need to very much communicate policy to employees, educate them about the policy and why, and then you can use the policy as you need to, but it should not be there as a punitive component of people's experience at a workplace. It should be to enhance the overall work experience and safety and health of your employees. Dr. Cherry or Sean, anything to add there?
I can add something to that. So my experience has been that, I was in the legislature working in this one state, and it was on drug testing policy. And, people think that first responders don't want to take drug tests, and that's not true. They actually want to take drug tests. They want them safely. However, the question came up is the laws were written in such a punitive manner that people wouldn't come forward, and there wasn't a clear chain of custody. And once a chain of custody got in and people felt confident, they want to work next to people who aren't under the influence either. So besides a policy, you really want to have a policy on chain of custody, what the testing looks like, where does it go, how does it go, what is that exactly measured, what are those measurements, because they can change from city to city, state to state. And I think, like Dara said, you have to review that all the time.
Yeah. And, the other thing too, and I think I've heard Chuck talk about it, Dara, was, that if you can't just pull it out and make a decision on the fly, that whatever it is that is going on, you have to utilize that and really roll it out with some education. So you can't just say, well, one day we're doing randoms, and then the next day we're not. There's a very specialized process and screening procedure that has to go on with that. Is that your understanding?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, I was saying communication is paramount and is key. And then also rolling this out, training your supervisors, training your teams. How do you manage situations? All of that is critical, because to Sean's point, it shouldn't be, again, this punitive thing that sits there that people get hit over the head with every chance that they get. It should be much more of a collaborative process around communication and understanding about why policies are in place. And really they're meant to be there to protect health and safety of the teams, but they've not historically been used that way. I also think that there's a big distinction too. Just we work with a lot of organizations that fall under federally regulated programs. So, for example, if you have truck drivers that fall under the Department of Transportation, it doesn't really matter where your state is, where your company is located, which state they're in, whether a drug is legal or not. It's all about the federal law that dictates kind of the abuse and substance abuse policies. So there's a lot of nuance to this. It's very complicated. So you have to work with people and experts in both legal compliance and making sure that this is implemented appropriately.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. The next one, actually, I really love this one because I thought about how it was that we managed this in a hospital setting, but I realized that that's probably not the same place everywhere else. But Phaedra had asked, if we have employees that were substance abusers, do you see much success with reintegrating back into the workplace after addiction treatment? And also, would we need to have a policy for continued screening?
I can answer what we do is, so the answer to the question or from our perspective is usually when we get somebody help and get them healthy, that we see a different individual come back, and they usually outperform their peers once they've got the proper help. And it's because they've changed their view. And especially in substance abuse, you're gonna find a person who was probably exhibited a lot of signs of being out of control or being unpredictable, and now they have predictability. The key, though, is again, treatment. I always believe is about calming down the situation. It's the aftercare, that long term of practicing what you do every single day, applying those life lessons. Because here's the deal: is we all know how to be a cop and a firefighter, but we don't know how to be a good human being sometimes. And that's where we really need our help. And because everybody I put in treatment, I don't need to put them in treatment because they're a cop. I need to put them in treatment because we lack some other area. So do I watch them integrate back into their work. Yeah, I actually watch them integrate better than and outperform their peers. I even had a chief one time tell me, he says, look, I'd rather hire alcoholics that go to AA all day long because they're a known quantity to me and I know how they're going to perform. And yeah, it comes down to is I tell people all the time, and especially administrators, I mean, especially on the federal level, when they have certain licenses and top secret security clearances, they ask that specific question, can I bring them back? And I said, look, this is the best employee you can bring back because it's the devil you know now, not the devil you don't. You have parameters that you can put on there, watch their performance. It's the ones that you don't know that are suffering in silence that can come up and bite you. So yes, let's get them back. Let's look at what that performance looks like. And then we have to take into many accounts. You know, do we have somebody that's an undercover narcotics officer that we put back in narcotics? Probably not. You know, it's, you know, I can't say never, but what I will say that we are going to look and see how we can integrate somebody back incrementally versus throwing them straight back in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, for those that may be in charge of choosing these types of programs, you want to look at those outcomes of success. But I agree with what Sean says, that those that are in treatment and then in continued maintenance, and then especially if they're part of kind of a mandatory referral, they usually will have requirements post-rehab and reintegration into the workplace that include additional drug testing over and above what would be a random drug testing protocol. So you do actually have a much more known quantity, so to speak, with that increased drug testing surveillance.
Yeah. And I like the idea, you know, the other piece of this is that I'm so glad that we're at this place where we're having this conversation, that if somebody does have a problem, that's not the end of the road, that we can help them through that and help them to come back into the workforce and probably be better than what they started out as you said, Sean. So I think that's a great conversation. All right, let's see. All right, one more. We have Keith that had asked, are you familiar with peer-to-peer programs for substance abuse and how do they work?
I am. We currently work with partners that actually offer that programming in about 30 states right now. So the peer-to-peer programming is assigning you a peer that we can get to match up for your situation, close to, that has an understanding of that, of what is happening with you. What do they work? Yeah. So I mean, I guess yes, peer support works. It's proven to work. However, do we need it to work for companies? Yes. What we've seen so far in the latest studies that came out was peer support reduced overall cost in substance abuse. I just saw an article last night actually on thoughts on this in regards to peer support in the opioid crisis. A study was done by MAP and how it reduced the overall healthcare cost on the peer-to-peer program. The other thing that they found out is they found out that they put a test group of 1,200 through out of Florida, and without peer support that went to treatment, and then with the peer support program, and they found that it lowered their reoccurrence rate to emergency rooms by 80% over the next 3 months. That's huge in the medical field.
Huh. Wow. So could you maybe explain a little bit further about what that would look like, about what the role would be, and maybe some details about how that would actually come to fruition? How would you put a program in like that into place where you would have peers that were supporting other peers?
Well, we obviously can definitely help that. I mean, because we don't serve all your population, but if others want to know, they can definitely get a hold of Holly and get to us. But the idea is we call and we vet people, so we triage people as they come through our line, and we look at what level of care they're indicating to us or giving us. And people always ask, they go, well, what about your call centers? They're just a bunch of cops and and things like that. And I said, well, here's the deal. These people are 20 and 30-year cops, and their whole job is referral. They're the best referral source you could ever imagine in your life, number one. And number two is they've all been through treatment, so they get this. They're the best, most highly trained in the world. So they're going to understand that what presenting problem is not really usually the real problem, and that's when you get them to Scott, because that's what he figures out. But we know that, having coming in mind. And then what we do is, if they're not reaching acute level of care and we're looking for local resources, now we're going to match them up with a peer. But we got a lot of collateral data to know what peer can handle this person. That's what's important to us, is we need the collateral information from that person. You know, I don't want someone calling up and say, hey, I want a peer, you know, to just talk to. It's like, well, what's going on? I mean, I can get you anybody to talk to, but I mean, the reality of is let's resolve what the issue is, or what you think it is, and then let's look at what the professional can do. Because one thing I will say, no matter whether we're peers or whatever, all of us that were in crisis never got better until we reached out to a third party, which is a professional. Wow. None of us ever got better. We all had to go to a professional.
Dr. Cherry, did you see any of this whenever in your military experience?
You know, yes, definitely. You have, you know, your battle buddy kind of throughout all of your assignments and activities and missions. And that's why we always talk about ask, care, and escort as kind of a check-in for mental health. And obviously, substance abuse is part of mental health. And then similarly, with either physical or mental injuries, keeping individuals engaged into their communities has been very predictive of success. So I'm also very supportive of that. And actually, having a strong community network is a positive predictor for many positive outcomes, to include, you know, happiness, decreased depression, decreased suicide, and even physical outcomes like heart attack, diabetes, that you would have not predicted otherwise. So there's a lot of at least correlation between support, community, family, friend support, and then also this kind of matched peer support that Sean's talking about.
So just to kind of give the audience a relate to, or a visual there. So would this be something along the lines of what you would see like with like an AA sponsor, somebody that's kind of an advocate for you in that role?
I think it could be viewed that way. I think there's many peer support programs. Obviously the peer is, you know, police officer to police officer, firefighter to firefighter. But then again, now we're watching the crossover where a firefighter can be a peer to a police officer. It doesn't necessarily, but in general, it's like an AA sponsor. That would be correct.
Okay. And then Dara, you have the HR experience. Talk to us about what it would look like, maybe, or what you would want to consider if you were going to look at some type of a policy or program or something like this that you were going to consider if you wanted to implement something along those lines.
Yeah, I think the world is evolving really quickly in this space. So I don't know that I have a really good recommendation at this point, other than to partner with good people and good organizations that are thinking about what's coming next. I do think it's going to be a very challenging couple of years for organizations, for the country, and so finding good partners and vendors that you can work with to collaborate is going to be critical.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. That wraps up the follow-up questions that we had. Any closing remarks before we close out?
Just want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's great. Anytime in the future, we'd love to join you all.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, Sean. This has been great. Dara and Dr. Cherry, either one of you have anything to add?
I'll just echo some of my comments earlier about those that are struggling or feel they have challenges with substance abuse. Really, in general, I believe the taboo or the stigma associated with reaching out for help is continuing to improve. And really, it's probably your best approach at improving your situation is reaching out through your company's EAP program as a self-referral. that usually has the best indicators for, or best outcomes of if you're struggling and potentially facing, drug testing or poor performance, things like that, versus if you're caught potentially on a random test. So I think in general, self-report is always a preferred method. So, consider that as you're, creating policies, but also as you're assessing your own need, or if you're talking to a coworker that has some issues.
Great. Tara?
I don't like following Dr. Cherry. I thought that was really well said, Dr. Cherry. No, I appreciate the conversation. I do think it's important, and it's a great topic that we'll continue to have conversations around, because this is becoming very obviously an important thing for employers to deal with. And so we will continue to drive this conversation forward. Thank you, Holly.
Fantastic. All right. So one more time, I'll just remind you, next Thursday, that's when we're doing the ABCs of CBD. So if you have not already registered for that, we send out the registration links in our email campaigns. We also post them on our social media channels, so you can get signed up right there. We've still had a tremendous amount of interest in the vaccination guide. Lots of employers are reaching out. We have taken this nationwide, and we're really deploying some great teams to put on some on-site vaccination there for the employees. So if you're interested in that, you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate. You can always reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way that we can. Obviously, if there's any questions you have, you can also reach us at coronavirus@axiomllc.com. So thank you again for joining, and we will see you Thursday.